The Nexiri warships burst from hyperspace like vengeful deities, their obsidian hulls blotting out the stars in a single, overwhelming wave. High above Orion Haven Colony, Commander Zara Delacroix stood transfixed at her post on Horizon Station, watching the catastrophe unfold through reinforced viewports. Her hands gripped the steel railing so hard her knuckles turned pale. "They're not even giving us terms," Lieutenant Novak said, voice cracking. "No calls for surrender, no list of demands, just—" He was cut off by a flash of violet light blazing across the station's monitors as the first plasma barrage ripped into the colony's primary agricultural dome. The dome, an immense crystalline structure, shattered like fine glass, shards glinting under the twin suns of Orion Haven. In the station's external cameras, Commander Delacroix could see thousands of tiny fragments spiraling into the void. Precious food reserves meant for millions, lost in seconds. "Get me a line to Terra Defense Command now," Delacroix ordered, already knowing the effort would be futile. The Nexiri had activated their dimensional interference field, scrambling every signal. No incoming or outgoing transmission stood a chance until the Nexiri were done here. A second attack struck the colony's residential sector. Delacroix felt bile rise in her throat as the massive energy beams tore through reinforced habitat units as though they were no more than paper. 2 million souls called Orion Haven home. 2 million dreamers and builders on the frontier. "Commander!" Security Chief Brandt shouted from across the control deck. "The civilian bunkers are still cycling their airlocks. Not everyone's inside." Delacroix slammed her fist on the console in fury. Overhead lights flickered with each barrage. "How many are we up against?" she demanded. 37 capital warships, Novak replied, his face ghostly pale. "Plus escorts." A bitter laugh escaped Delacroix's lips. "They brought 37 vessels to slaughter civilians. How very heroic of them." The station AI chimed in with icy composure. "Warning. Hull breach detected in sections 12 through 15. Emergency protocols engaged." Through the chaos, panic-stricken radio calls from the planet drifted through what few channels still worked. Children crying, final words to loved ones. Each transmission seared itself into Delacroix's soul like a brand. "They're hitting the mining complexes now," Novak shouted, eyes locked on the readouts. "Those fusion reactors—" The ground-based explosion lit up the night sky as if a star had ignited on Orion Haven's surface. Shockwaves rippled outward, flattening everything. The station's radiation monitors shrieked warnings, then fell silent as their circuits fried. Delacroix stood rigid, tears burning her cheeks as she bore witness to Orion Haven's last moments. She knew precisely what the Nexiri hoped to achieve. They wanted to shatter humanity's resolve, scare them into submission. But they had no concept of the sleeping power they had just unleashed. She drew a trembling breath. "Begin log," she said, voice unsteady yet resolute. "Timestamp 2347 standard. Orion Haven Colony has fallen. 2 million civilians presumed dead. No provocation. No mercy." She hesitated, letting the grief fuel her next words. "May whatever gods the Nexiri follow forgive them. Because after this—" She inhaled, voice turning cold as steel. "We sure won't." Outside, the Nexiri warships aligned for departure, engines flaring as they tore back into hyperspace, leaving the wreckage behind. They hadn't bothered destroying Horizon Station. They wanted witnesses, someone to carry the tale of their brutality so fear would infect every human world. Their unspoken message was clear. Be afraid. This is what happens when you expand too far, too fast. But as Commander Delacroix watched them vanish, a terrible certainty took root. They hadn't just murdered colonists, they'd awakened dragons. Chaos erupted in the Terran Council chamber the instant Delacroix's transmission ended. Holographic displays around the obsidian table showed Orion Haven's destruction in unflinching detail. Shattered domes, radiation-scorched craters, drifting remains of once thriving neighborhoods. 2 million people, Councilor Ramirez snarled, slamming his fist on the polished surface. Killed without warning. At the head of the chamber, Admiral Marcus Wynn stood silent, his lined features lit by the red glow of emergency lights. At 73, he was the oldest active leader of Earth's military forces, and his mere presence was enough to hold the Council's fraying unity intact. "The Nexiri think we're vulnerable," Wynne said at last, voice resonating like a hammer. "They believe we're farmers playing at Empire. Soft, complacent." A dangerous spark flickered in his eyes. "It's time we show them their mistake." The sudden hush was electric. Everyone knew Wynne's reputation. He hadn't led Earth's forces for 3 decades by being gentle. "Operation Wyvern Forge," he announced, tapping a control on his wrist device. The main holographic screen switched to reveal an enormous station hidden deep within the asteroid belt. "While we've offered the galaxy a friendly face, we've been preparing for exactly this kind of threat." Counselor Isley leaned forward. "Preparing how, exactly?" Wynne's expression never wavered. "The Nexiri aren't the first Empire to believe we're an easy target. They made the same mistake as every bully in human history. They underestimated us." The hologram zoomed in, revealing row after row of sleek ships, unlike anything humanity had publicly acknowledged. Predatory lines, hulls that devoured light. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wynne said, "this is the real Terran defense fleet. While our official shipyards have been building archaic cruisers and retrofitted freighters, Wyvern Forge has been designing warships that will make our ancestors proud." Counselor Donahue stared at the stats scrolling by. "These specs, they're decades ahead of what any known species has." Wynne's grin was grim. "Did you think humanity emerged from centuries of internal conflict without learning to hide our hand? We've been showing the cosmos only what we wanted them to see." Around the chamber, footage of Orion Haven still played. Families lost, buildings obliterated. Wynne raised a hand toward those tragic images. "Well, that's all done. The Nexiri want to send a message?" His voice hardened to tempered steel. "We'll send one right back. Something simple, that every species can translate: do not provoke humanity." The vote that followed was unanimous. For the first time in 30 years, Admiral Marcus Wynne enacted the order he'd quietly hoped never to give. Unleash the Wyverns. On the Nexiri border outpost, no one saw the Spectre-class carriers arrive. They glided through the star system's sensor nets like phantoms, invisible to every early warning beacon. Within their armored corridors, crew members worked in silent coordination, neural interfaces eliminating the need for words. Fleet Commander Jade Ferris stood on the bridge of the Skybreath, eyes on the tactical display like a bird of prey. The Nexiri station ahead floated quietly, its defenses on standby, entirely oblivious to the storm about to strike. "All squadrons, ready," her tactical officer relayed over the neural network. "Wyvern wings prepped and eager." Ferris permitted herself a small, cold smile. "Deploy the Wyverns." Across the Spectre carriers, launch bays parted in absolute silence. Swarming out were Wyvern-class assault craft, nimble, lethal, and bristling with hidden tech that defied conventional limitations. The first sign of disaster for the Nexiri came when their main reactor abruptly died. The second sign was their own defense grid turning inward on them. By the time alarm klaxons sounded, it was too late. "What are these ships?" came the panicked broadcast of the Nexiri commander, his voice filled with disbelief. "How are they?" His words ceased in a burst of static as a wyvern's dimensional blade carved his cruiser into 2 symmetric halves. The unstoppable human craft danced through enemy fire with eerie grace, shrugging off the station's best weapons. "All those gift technologies we gave them," a Nexiri officer wailed over an open channel. "They're using them in ways we never... This is impossible." From the Skybreath, Ferris watched the synchronized ballet of death, her ship's dark forge armor soaking up enemy blasts. "Transmit our statement," she said. Across every Nexiri monitor, Admiral Wynn's image appeared, aged, unyielding, and resolute. "You thought we were helpless. Now you see our truth. This is just the beginning." As if on cue, the Wyvern wings reassembled in perfect formation. Below them, the Nexiri outpost lay in ruins, its ships shredded, its stations gutted. Humanity had taken not a single loss. Message incoming from Nexiri High Command, Ferris's comms officer reported in quiet disbelief. They're demanding to know what we are. Ferris activated her own broadcast. We are the real Terran fleet. The ships you believed we had? Decoys, masks. This is who we truly are. Now you know what wyverns can do. Then, as silently as they had come, the carriers vanished back into hyperspace, leaving behind a graveyard of Nexiri wreckage. Within hours, word would race through the cosmos. Human forces had technology that defied logic, a mastery of warfare beyond any known species. In the Nexiri war room, the stunned High Command stared at casualty lists written in staggering numbers. Their most fortified defenses overrun in minutes. What have we unleashed? The Nexiri war minister whispered. The response came swiftly, borne on the wings of more unstoppable assaults in multiple star systems. The Nexiri had sought a war, only to find themselves outmatched by nightmares clothed in illusions of weakness. The wyverns had awakened, and they were hungry. 25 years before those catastrophic battles, Commander Riko Shinoda inspected the first prototype of a Wyvern-class fighter in an immense subterranean hangar beneath the surface of Mars. "It's incredible, isn't it?" said a then-Captain Marcus Wynn, stepping up beside her. "Aliens think we're still fumbling with basic shield equations." Shinoda nodded, resting her hand against the fighter's hull. The grand deception wasn't just hiding our progress, it was hiding who we truly are. A memory played out. Shinoda briefing Earth's combined war councils 6 months after first contact, pointing out patterns in advanced civilizations. Humanity has something none of the alien races we've encountered possess, an unbroken warrior tradition spanning millennia. They grew out of theirs. We learned to refine ours, and, most importantly, we learned to disguise it. Now, decades later, Shinoda served as chief strategist at Wyvern Forge, her office hidden under Titan's icy crust. Artifacts from Earth's military heritage lined the walls: a samurai sword, an ancient legionnaire's shield, a battered marine helmet. Not for decoration, but as tangible reminders. She stood before a group of newly minted Wyvern pilots. Spartans, Mongols, samurai, special forces, we never abandoned their tactics. We digitized them, analyzed them, built them into our starships, and elevated them with advanced technology. Screens displayed fresh data from the Nexiri front. Another fleet decimated, more recorded miracles of impossible weaponry. Each trade pact, each technology deal, was meticulously orchestrated, Shinoda continued. We let them see clumsy, outdated vessels, while Wyvern Forge churned out machines that defied their science. We pretended to learn from them, while our best minds shredded the boundaries of physics behind closed doors. A young pilot raised a hand. But Commander, why? Why hide our power for so long? Shinoda smiled coolly. Humans know something the Nexiri never grasped. When your foe underestimates you, you've already won half the battle. We learned that from our warlords and generals across centuries. Deception multiplies force. She gestured to real-time displays of Nexiri cruisers collapsing under Wyvern weaponry. We always knew a day would come when some empire decided we were easy prey. Our entire strategy was to be ready to finish a fight someone else started. A year into the conflict, Ambassador Traylon stood on the bridge of a Nexiri diplomatic ship, forced to witness the largest Nexiri armada in history being torn apart in the Centaur Rift. Over 300 vessels, once the symbol of Nexiri might, now nothing but blazing wreckage. Next to him, High Admiral Jarath was ashen. They were so primitive. We've observed them for decades. Traylon let out a trembling sigh. Number? They observed us. It was a sight that defied every Nexiri doctrine. Wyvern-class warships phasing through solid matter, ignoring what everyone else considered hard limits. When they were fired upon, they simply ceased to be in that location. When they attacked, they bypassed the best defenses known to the Nexiri as though they were illusions. They adapted all the technology we gave them, and so much more, Traylon whispered. All those times we thought we were helping them catch up. They were developing counters to everything we have. The next wave of dimensional anomalies ripped open in the vacuum, heralding the arrival of more Terran fleets, each force more staggering than the last. A frantic Nexiri officer shouted over the command channel, "We must surrender! We have to!" Commander Ferris's calm, disembodied voice flooded every Nexiri frequency. "Oh no! You don't just get to surrender until you understand fully what you've done. You wanted a lesson. We're going to make sure it's one you never forget." Then, reality itself seemed to split, and space around the Nexiri ships began to unravel in ways that made Traylin's mind reel. He barely managed to activate his emergency teleporter. His last sight from the war zone was the unstoppable might of humanity casually rewriting the laws of combat. Back on the Nexiri homeworld, now circled by the smoldering wrecks of its defenses, Supreme Regent Mira watched in horror as 1,000 Terran ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect unison. They arranged themselves in a near-perfect sphere around the planet, an awe-inspiring cosmic barricade. "The entire Nexiri military is paralyzed," someone in the command center whispered. "They've surrounded our star system completely." Admiral Wynn's voice rang out through every speaker in the system. "Your people need to witness what happens next, and why." The Wyvern fleets shifted formation, revealing a gargantuan construct phasing into view behind them. It dwarfed any known station, a world forge, capable of strip mining entire planets for raw materials to construct more Wyvern-class vessels. Wynn continued, "We can reduce your planet to atoms and remake them into more of our ships. We already have 6 such forges. Want a demonstration?" Mira stabbed a control, broadcasting on all frequencies, voice shaking. "Please, we surrender. Unconditionally." A soft, dangerous chuckle emanated from Wynn. "Interesting thing about surrender. It assumes we want it." His hologram appeared in the command center with flawless clarity. The chamber doors opened, revealing Commander Zara Delacroix, clad in pristine dress uniform, followed by the refugees from Orion Haven Colony. Their faces flickered on numerous floating displays. 2 million men, women, and children," Delacroix said quietly. "You slaughtered them to send a message, Regent Mira." "Fine. We got it. Now we're returning the favor." The World Forge began to glow, the Wyvern fleet adjusting position to target every major Nexiri metropolis. Yet Delacroix raised a hand. Instantly, the armada stood down, the forge powering off. "Why?" Mira asked, voice quivering. "You could exterminate us. Why hesitate?" Admiral Wynn stepped forward. "Because humanity's greatest strength isn't in destruction. It's in our ability to choose. Right now, we choose not to become the monsters you assumed we were." Delacroix nodded. "Our conditions. Your entire military hierarchy submits to Terran authority, your weapons are scrapped, your empire becomes a protectorate of Earth. In return," she managed a small, grim smile, "we show you our real specialty, not just how to wage war, but how to end it, and how to build something better from the ashes." Images of newly arrived Terran ships filled the screens, construction vessels, medical barges, terraforming platforms. Though smaller in scale than the terrifying battleships, they carried with them an air of hope, of renewal. "You wanted to see humanity's true face," Wynn said softly. "Here it is. We can be your worst nightmare or your greatest ally. We can turn your worlds to dust or make them flourish beyond your imagination. The choice," his gaze bore into Mira's, "is no longer yours. It's ours." Mira gazed around at the unstoppable might arrayed against her, the grim faces of Orion Haven's survivors, the unstoppable technology. And she finally understood. Humanity had not spent decades preparing just to unleash violence, but to forge a future, one no enemy could easily overturn. "We accept," she said, bowing her head. "And thank you." Delacroix exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. "Lesson learned?" "Never wake the Wyverns," Mira replied with trembling sincerity. Wynn's eyes glinted. "Another correction. The Wyverns were never asleep. We've simply been waiting to see who might be worthy to soar alongside us." A year after the Nexiri surrendered, Ambassador Trellin delivered his final address to the Galactic Council on humanity's ascendancy. In their own words, "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We Nexiri failed to learn. We brought war to those who'd spent decades honing every possible advantage, quietly concealing their might. We essentially handed them every excuse to put their true power on display. Behind him, holograms showed how former Nexiri worlds were changing. Fortress planets turned into centers of higher learning, relic war factories remodeled into hospitals, wastelands terraformed into fertile farmland. The same unstoppable genius that had shattered fleets was now rebuilding civilizations. To any who contemplate following our misstep, Traylon said gravely, heed this. That unassuming human frigate you're scanning? It might be a Wyvern-class dreadnought in disguise. That colony you think is vulnerable? It's likely built on top of a hidden forge. And if they come asking for technology assistance, he allowed himself a rueful smile. Just remember they might be gleaning far more from you than you will ever get from them. High above Earth, Commander Zara Delacroix observed Traylon's speech from the command deck of her newly commissioned Wyvern-class carrier, Second Chances. The name was deliberate, a nod to the greatest human strength. Not bigger weapons, but the power to choose how and when to use them. Usually,